serving a life sentence in prison. Well, come to find out, my mother was behind getting her ex-husband killed. And the thing is, it's not just, he just wasn't anybody. He was a lieutenant firefighter. And the way the story all came out, they didn't find out that my mother was behind it for 2 years after his death. The first situation, when he was originally found dead, he was shot and killed in their driveway. My brother calls me and tells me that he was shot and killed and that my mother was crying, losing it, gone crazy. The whole entire time, there ended up being a 2-year investigation to figure out what happened to him. Upon the investigation, it was found out that my mother had paid my little sister's boyfriend to find somebody to help her kill her husband. And not just kill him for no particular reason. She killed him to get the insurance money. But come to find out, his ex-wife was still on the insurance policy. So essentially, my mother did all of that for nothing. And then that's how she ended up becoming donkey of the day. She got him killed. It was a whole big thing. It was so sad. All for the insurance money that she wasn't even on a policy for. What makes it so bad is that a whole community was affected by his death. He was such an amazing man. He did so much for the community. It was just unfortunate that he had to die under those type of circumstances. So when it all came out, it was said that my mother got my little sister's boyfriend to hire his cousin, who then hired somebody else to be the shooter and killed him while he came back from getting his McDonald's. It's such an unfortunate situation, and it was so crazy that they ended up making a couple Lifetime movies, shows on Oxygen, and everything in between because the story was so wild. If you want to know the full story, comment below and I'll keep going with part 2 to give you the full scoop. So my sister comes to me and tells me that she just got an indictment from a grand jury. I'm like, girl, what is going on? And at the time, my sister was underage. So I'm like, what are you talking about? An indictment for what? And she said she didn't know. Come to find out, it was about her ex-boyfriend, his cousin, and a bunch of other people got indicted. During the indictment, I get her lawyer because I'm like, I don't know what the heck is going on. This sounds crazy. I've never been involved in anything like this, so I don't know what to do. So when she gets back from her trial, she tells me that her boyfriend happened to be at the house when our stepfather was killed. All of that information was not told during the funeral, during the whole thing. So I'm looking at her sideways like, okay, listen, I don't know what's going on. I don't care what's going on. You don't even have to tell me what's going on. But I do know, you better tell that grand jury what you really know. Because at the end of the day, somebody is going to jail. And you need to make sure that it's not you. Because your life is going to be over. I don't care. I don't care who you got to tell on. I don't care who you got to snitch on. Your mama, your boyfriend, whoever. Whatever you know, you better tell them. A couple days later, she comes back to me and tells me she has an opportunity to go back and talk to the grand jury again. I said, girl, I don't know what's going on, but you better tell them. She comes back. Her attorney, because she's underage, her attorney has been, talking to me, and because I paid the deposit, the attorney tells me that she's looking to be part involved in this damn trial, that they have all this evidence against my mother as being the prime suspect in the murder. I said, what? What do you mean? How is she the prime suspect? And they're like, Well, it looks like your mother was after the insurance money. And so now we have everybody willing to do a plea to testify against your mother and find her guilty of all of this. And I'm blown away because I'm like, how is that even possible? Like, when did this happen? But I did know my mother was moving really, really foul. Things got really, really scary. And when I tell y'all, next thing I know, the media was swarming me, calling me, trying to get the scoop. It was crazy. Hey y'all, so part 3. So at this point, I am stressed out because I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to believe. Like, this is all a big wash to me, because literally I was with my mother planning this man's funeral. Because my mother was so distraught, she couldn't make some of the finalized decisions. Like, I wrote the obituary, I was talking with his ex-wife, I was helping his daughter. I just felt like, I don't know if y'all seen like that SpongeBob meme, and it's like all that stuff kind of going around, and you're just like looking like, oh my gosh, like I had an anxiety attack because I couldn't believe all this stuff was happening. And you know, all these media outlets were reaching out to me. And so then when I was talking to my sister's lawyer, he pretty much explained to me that they found out my mother was the prime suspect because one of the kids, I call them kids because they were so young that my mother got to do this. They told a lot of people, you know, to get some type of street cred that they got a body or whatever. So this cousin got picked up on a minor drug charge. Like, I think he had some weed or something on him. And so instead of him, you know, taking that charge, he was like, whoa, instead of me doing jail time, what if I told y'all I can give y'all information on a mystery that y'all been trying to solve for so long, for the past 2 years, a high quality, big case that I can crack for y'all if y'all let me off. And because this dude had receipts, he was able to back this stuff up. And that's how they even found out about it. And this would happen literally 2 years after Will was killed. So come to find out, he has all the receipts, and he starts singing like a bird and getting everybody's coming down. And so then my sister's involved because my sister knew about it and didn't say anything. And because she was underage, even though I have more stories to tell about my mother, but one of the things is my mother is very manipulative. And so we've had a really up and down relationship. And so the fact that my sister was able to control my sister like this, lets me know how desperate she really was. So what she tried to do is, you know, have my sister know and kind of put that over her head that if she ever said anything, then she's going down too. And so I think that's why my sister originally was super scared and didn't know what to say to the grand jury. She was nervous, all of these things going on. It just ended up being such a big thing. That's why there's all these media outlets, all this stuff going on. It was nuts, crazy, unbelievable. Part 3. So at this point, it has gotten really serious. My sister's lawyer comes to me and saying yeah, this is a high profile murder case. It's gonna cost about 50 bands for me to be your sister's attorney. And when that man said 50 bands, I said, excuse me, 50 what? 50, you expect me to get you 50 bands? I don't, sir, I'm 25, I got married. I'm actually taking my sister's child because everybody's getting indictments and they're locking people up. Everybody that was involved, they are. My mother, they didn't actually go get my mother. My mother actually turned herself in. Somebody convinced her to just actually turn herself in, because I didn't know what their plan was, how they was gonna get her, because literally everybody else that was involved was in jail, singing like a bird, you know, because everybody got scared once, you know, they start throwing all this stuff in your face. These boys were 19, 20, 21, they're all looking at life if they didn't do the plea deal. My sister, because she was treated like a minor, she was looking at juvie life and all of these things. And so I'm looking like, wow, so this is really happening. Like this is for real. So I had to really start thinking and doing my research because I don't know what's going on. I'm literally begging this lawyer. Like I'm begging him. Literally, my sister was the only person that had a lawyer. Everybody else had public defenders. When I tell you it was nothing but God, you hear me? God, my God, that saved my sister. Like for whatever reason, that man found favor with me and my sister, and he's like, you know, I'm willing, you pay me a little bit here and there, and you know, but I'm gonna make it work. Because I'm like, there's no way that my sister's gonna sit in juvie. I can't have my sister in juvie. And the crazy thing is, because my sister is in juvie, I can't even contact her, because if you're in juvenile custody, the only people that you can talk to are your parents. And since my mother was in prison, the only other person that she could talk to was her father. So if I wanted to communicate with her, I had to communicate with her father. And the crazy thing about her father, y'all, he was my abuser. He sexually abused me from the age of 5 to 12. So that made things really difficult. Stand for part 5, y'all. So I know I just threw y'all for a loop because y'all wasn't expecting that to kind of happen in the story, but that's a whole separate story. But to give you a little bit of background, one of the reasons why me and my mother had such a strained relationship is because she knew that I was sexually abused. And she chose to not do anything about it until, you know, he had really harmed her. And once he harmed her, then she was ready to go to court. We did go to court, but it ended up being a mistrial because my mother lied in the trial because she also still wanted to maintain a relationship with him. And so because my mother was still like communicating with him, and I understand that was my little brother and sister's father, for me personally, it just didn't sit well with me. So when I got of age, 17, 18, I moved out away from my mother, and there's going to be another story time for that because there's so many other stories within that to even get, but just to give you the Cliff Notes version so we can get back to the original story that we were talking about. It was difficult, and so my sister did end up having to go to juvie, and she went to juvie, you know, while they were awaiting trial, but I was able to get her out on house arrest with her attorney, because then we also found out that she was pregnant again, and because she was pregnant, she was able, they didn't want anything to happen to her while she was in juvie under state care. So literally my niece saved her life. Like my niece saved her and helped her with her attorney to kind of build the case on why she could not be in the actual juvenile facility until they awaited trial. Y'all, trial took, it was almost 2 years before they went to trial for this case. So everyone that's involved has been in jail awaiting trial because none of them made bond. They all had public defenders, and it just wasn't looking good. And so by the time the trial happened, I could not attend. I think the Lord did that on purpose because I was pregnant with my daughter, and when the trial began, I could have went into labor. You know, you're within that couple week frame where you can go into labor. So I did not go into labor, but I was getting updates every single day because I was just so distraught. Like I could not believe what I had heard because I was so involved with helping her through this situation with the funeral and all this stuff. So it was a mess, y'all. Stay tuned for part 6. So before we kind of get into the trial, I gotta give you a little bit of backstory so you understand my mother and kind of how she did a really good job at manipulating people. Like my mother was the type of person that was very well spoken. She dressed really well. She spoke really highly. Like, you would think that she was from like a very good, she had a very good upbringing, all of these things, because this is the persona she allowed herself to feel like, to be like. So she could get people to believe that the sky was green because she would have all these facts. Like, she just did a very good job at manipulating people. Like, that was her thing. That's how she caught people. Because lo and behold, in reality, my mama was a scammer, but she was just very good at scamming and getting people to believe what she said. Therefore, you wouldn't think that she was a scammer. So, for example, my mother had her own business, and this business was, so in Ohio, there's a very high Jewish population. And a lot of times when some of the Jewish get older, like their kids don't send them to nursing homes. So instead of sending them to a nursing home, they will get them a private caretaker. And what my mother did is she became that caretaker by saying she was a nurse. So she got all the fake qualifications. Like, she made her own college transcripts, her own degrees, all this other stuff as a nurse. And so people hired her, and she got like a really good reputation because, through word of mouth, that she was an awesome caretaker. And so she had this one client for a very long time, and it ended up going to the point that this client needed 24-hour care. And so by this client needing 24-hour care, my mother was technically supposed to be there all the time. But instead, she hired people, she didn't really hire people. She hired like me and my siblings. And when I stopped doing it, because my mother really wasn't paying us, she was just making us work for her. And so with my sister was like 16, 17 at this time, and she made my sister drop out of school and work for her. And the reason why she did it was not just for her to get money, but also to trick Will that my sister also lived part-time with her dad, which was never true. So when she wasn't living with my mother, she was at her dad's house, but in actuality, she was working for my mother. And so my sister got involved with doing this because she just really wanted to have this love from my mother. Like, my mother was just so harsh to us that we just wanted to feel loved. And so sometimes when you're under trauma like that, or you're in an abusive situation, like, you'll do anything to please that person. And that's what happened with my sister. Like, my mom just manipulated her to kind of be involved with this and kind of help her with this situation because she knew what she was doing. Stay tuned for part 7 because it gets worse. Hey family, so before we kind of get into the trial, I gotta give you a little bit of backstory so you understand. Okay, so y'all kind of see already like how my mother was moving and how she was acting and what was going on. So when it came to my sister, my sister was the baby, right? And there's an 8-year difference between me and my sister. And so my sister at this time was like 16, 17. My mom is just being like really mean and rude to her and just not like being a mother, right? But to Will and his kids, like, she was the best thing since sliced bread. Like, if you go and look at any of the interviews, like when Will's daughter found out it was my mother, she was really shocked because my mother was literally a second mother to her. Like, she treated those kids way better than she treated me and my siblings. It's almost like we didn't exist and that was her new family. So with my sister, sometimes I think she would get into it because my sister just wanted that love that she was able to show other people. She wanted to be able to feel that as well. And my mother just did not have the ability to do it because she was so focused on her own plan, her own end goal, whatever the case may be. So like I told y'all, she was a scammer, and what she was doing was sometimes my mother would make herself sick, and by making herself sick, it would almost appear as if she had cancer. So she told people that she was a cancer survivor, even though she had never had cancer, but mysteriously it came back. And what my mother would do is she would go to these different hospitals and kind of just make herself sick. So you know how you have a lot of power to control your brain, right? So like, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where it's like, you may think that you're sick, and so you think you're sick so bad that your body starts to resemble symptoms of that sickness, right? And so that's what my mother would do. And because she hopped around to all these different hospitals, no one really had real records of her illness and what was really going on.
And since she had her own business, it was almost like she didn't have insurance. And so because she didn't have insurance, and Will was such a great person, he's like, yeah, like, of course, like, let's get married and you can be on my insurance, and then I can help you and we can just figure things out. Because they were also in the process of buying a new home. Literally, the day he got shot, that next day, they were set up to move to their well, it wasn't a brand new house, but it was new to them. They were moving, like they were moving out the hood and going out to the burbs because they were starting this new life together. But while they had got the house, some stuff had came up where it was a lot of credit cards, a lot of loans, and stuff out in his name that Will didn't know about. And so what he started to do was he got a private investigator to try to figure out what is all this going on and what's happening. So it was getting serious. So stay tuned for part 7. Okay, y'all. So I told y'all that Will was, getting suspicious about what was going on. And so my mother, originally what I found out during the trial is that she reached out to my little brother and sister's father for help, to help her try to figure out how to get rid of, this situation, so Will wouldn't know that, my mother was behind all of it. Because I don't know if she was afraid, or I don't know what her end goal was, right? Maybe she thought that she was gonna get all this money. And apparently they were in the process of updating his insurance policy, and he was adding my mother. However, he never finalized the policy. And so that made my mother, I guess my mother thought that that's what was like she was gonna get that money. Like she's like, oh, I'm about to get this money. Like, okay, so I need to get rid of him so I can get all this money and come up. So when my little brother and sister's father said that no, oh, I lost my earring. When my little brother and sister's father said no, that he wasn't going to help her, she reached out to my sister and asked her to ask her boyfriend. Because think about it, these dudes, they're young, they're from the hood. If you're from the west side of Cleveland, then you know that it's giving kind of like low income, poverty stricken, like they don't know anything. So my mother's employment ties into this because one of her long-term clients ends up dying and supposedly left my mother in the will. And this is what she told them, like she left her in the will and left her some money and this not BMW, and she would give them the money if, I would give y'all $10,000 if y'all help me, get rid of him. And I guess she told them that he was beating on her and treating her all wrong and doing all this stuff. So that made them like, oh, you know what? Like, okay, we can do that. And to them, think about it, $10,000 is no money. So you already know kind of like the level of intelligence these boys have, because they think 10 bands is a lot of money, and it's like 3 of them. And so they were willing to split $10,000 in an old BMW to take somebody's life. Like, make it make sense. And so originally, I guess my sister's boyfriend told his cousin, because I guess my sister's boyfriend was gonna do it, but he's like, nah, I can't, you know what, I just can't do it. So he asked his cousin. His cousin was like, oh, no, I know somebody who be shooting people all the time. That's what he do. He's a hired hit man. So I'ma call him because he know what's up and he kind of slow, and so he be doing all type of stuff. But stay tuned for part 9 because it gets even juicier, because it's even the stuff you be like, wait, what? This really happened? And so stay tuned. Y'all, so at this point they have hired this hitman who was like 19 at the time. He's kind of slow. He's known in the area for like robbing like Family Dollars and Save-A-Lots and stuff like that. So he's known as like, oh, he's gonna be the hitman. But they are all like planning all this stuff out. So my mother was the mastermind behind everything, and she is the reason why Will is dead. And because of that, and she's the mastermind, she got life in prison, right? Now, her co-conspirators would be my sister's boyfriend, his cousin, and the shooter. So my sister's boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend, he got 28 years. his cousin got 23 years, and the shooter, I think, got like 19 years because he didn't really know about the plan. He was just doing his job. So he got 19 years. But all of them, like, because of them, Will wouldn't be dead without them. But because my mother was the mastermind, the top dog, she was the one that went down. But the crazy thing is, so my sister got in trouble because she knew about it and did not say anything. But at the same time, you have to realize my sister is underage and my mother is manipulating her and saying all this stuff. And so all of this stuff is going on. But then the crazy part, if you flip back and you start thinking about the funeral, like, stuff started making sense because my mother at this funeral, y'all, like, I don't know if y'all seen like them crazy like black movies where the people be like jumping in the casket like, oh, take me with him, like, I can't do it, like, I can't live without him, I can't. That's how my mother was acting. My mother showed her ass at that funeral. You hear me? Showed her ass. She wouldn't stop crying. And then because he was a firefighter, there was like a lieutenant, there was a firefighter fund. They gave her money. I went to go pick up some of that money because let me tell you, I was there as being like the good daughter to help her mother through this whole situation. I was just helping her. And then my sister was also being really weird during this whole time because my mother was just letting her off with her boyfriend, and she was staying with her boyfriend and living with her boyfriend at 17. I'm up here and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, stuff was just not making sense. So now when all the pieces start coming together, you're like, yo, this is some wild shit. Like, I cannot believe all this stuff happened. And because of that, like, my sister got involved, and my sister, because she was underage, she was going to juvie, so she was charged as a juvenile. And so with it being a juvenile, oh y'all, I'm about to end time, so just stay tuned for the next part. Just like I was saying, it was 2 years. The trial took 2 years to happen. So by the time the trial finally happened, my sister ends up getting juvie life. So juvie life is until you're 21. However, by the time my mother got, because you know you have a trial and then you have sentencing. So by the time my mother got sentenced, my sister was 20 and turning 21 that next month. So y'all can't tell me that Jesus wasn't with my sister the whole time. Because y'all think about this. My sister has been on house arrest for 2 years. Finally, by the time they go to trial, part of her plea is she gets juvie life. Juvie life is until you're 21. My sister is 20 and turning 21 in three-ish weeks. And so by the time they sentence my sister, she ends up going to like a halfway camp situation for a couple weeks. Now, mind you, during this time, when all this stuff went down, I ended up taking custody of my sister's son. My sister had a son with her boyfriend at the time when all this stuff was going on. Come to find out, you know, they had like a little, I guess y'all both in trouble. Y'all make a love child after all this craziness going on. So that's how he ended up being conceived. And my sister made me his godmother. And I remember when he was born, she told me like, hey, if anything ever happened to him, like, please look out for me. So when all this stuff went down, I literally lived in Oklahoma. I had to drop everything I had and go grab him because my sister's boyfriend's mother was acting a complete fool when all this stuff went down, because she was like, oh, well, if my son is going away, I'm taking your son away, and you ain't never gonna see your son if I have to wait for all this stuff, because she was clearly blaming my sister as to the reason why her son decided to do what he did and be caught up in all this mess. And so it was just a lot going on. And so then after the sentencing, girl, all the shows start coming, I said donkey of the day because my mother was literally donkey of the day. She was on the Shade Room. There wasn't a place, a storyline, a news outlet that was not posting this story, because the crazy thing is she did all this and didn't get no money. So she looks like an idiot. She did all of this and didn't get no money. And then at the trial, she did not testify and she did not show any remorse. Like, she was just looking like, it is what it is. And like when my sister was on trial testifying against her, she was just looking at my sister like she wanted to kill my sister, because my sister was telling the truth. So long story short, after all of that, that's why my mother's serving a life sentence. She got life in prison, and then the first couple of years she was in denial, like she didn't believe that she was actually, you know, in prison. So that's the end of that story. Wait till y'all hear the next story I'll tell. Oh, okay, y'all. So this is the bonus episode. Sorry, I got my retainer in, so if I'm lisping, I apologize. But this is the bonus episode, and what I'm going to be talking about is what happened in between the time of Will's funeral and when my mom went to prison. So those 2 years were crazy. A lot happened. My mother did end up moving into the house because the next day they were literally scheduled to move in. So they moved. The firefighters came and helped her move, so she wasn't doing it by herself. Like, they were all going through Will's stuff. He did get cremated, so his kids got a portion of him, and then she also had him in a urn and stuff like that. But my mother was being weird because she didn't even stay at that house long. A lot of times, a lot of people thought, well, maybe she just didn't want to have to do it by herself, like what was going on. And so then she told me that she's moving to North Carolina. Now, around that time, I had just moved from North Carolina to Oklahoma. Like, we stayed in North Carolina for a little bit, and I was moving to Oklahoma. So I moved to Oklahoma. She's moving to North Carolina. At that time, I wanted my little sister to come move with me because I could not understand why my mother was letting her just be out here all willy-nilly with her boyfriend. I'm like, what is going on? Like, maybe my mother has lost it. Like, losing Will made her go crazy or something. Like, I don't know. So she's telling me that she has moved to right outside of Fayetteville, like the suburbs area of Fayetteville. I have a cousin there who retired from the military, and so she was living there. And my mother got a townhouse, and she was staying with my grandmother. Like, my mother's mother lived with her. She was on Social Security, and I guess that was steady income for my mother, was my grandmother. Come to find out, my mother was telling me that my sister was also living with her, but she really wasn't. I was calling, trying to talk to my sister. There was always some craziness going around. So randomly, I get this DM, right? And this DM is from my sister's cousin. And she was like, Jessica, I can't take this no more. You need to come to Cleveland and get your sister because her baby shower is tomorrow and she's pregnant. I'm like, my sister who? They're like, your sister, your only sister you got, she's pregnant and she's due like in 2 weeks. I said, how is that even possible? So during this whole time, I didn't know that my sister got pregnant. My mother had moved to North Carolina and left my sister in Ohio with her boyfriend, who kept getting kicked out of the house from her baby daddy's mom's house. It was just a mess. Like, all of this stuff going on. I had to cuss out my mama because why am I finding out this through a DM on Instagram, y'all? Bonus part 2 coming next. Okay, y'all, so I found all this out and I'm pissed because I'm like, why am I in the dark? Why is nobody telling me? And so I called my sister like, so you pregnant? And she just starts crying and she's like, well, mommy said that you wouldn't talk to me no more and that you're going to so upset and you're so disappointed because I'm not finishing school and all this other stuff. I told y'all at the very beginning that my mother does a very good job at manipulating people. So my mother manipulated my sister into believing that I wasn't going to look out for her because she got pregnant. So she's like, well, when I have this baby, that's when I told y'all before, she asked me to be his godparent, all this stuff, because I couldn't even get to her fast enough because literally after her baby shower, she went into labor pretty soon. And so I'm calling my mother like, how come you left your pregnant daughter? You left your pregnant underage daughter under somebody else's care? Like, what is wrong with you? So this is having me, I'm starting to look at her sideways. I always look at my mama sideways, but I'm really looking at her sideways like, wow, you are so selfish. And then the fact that you were lying to me, like when I tell y'all, I would call my mother and I would ask to speak to my sister. She must have been calling her on three-way, making this whole ordeal to try to keep up this lie. Because you know, when you first start lying, you got to keep up with the lies because it's a lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. Like, you got to keep lying to keep it up. And so I make my mother, I said, well, if you have this child and your baby, mind you, my sister is the baby. She's the youngest out of all three of us. And you mean to tell me you about to let your daughter have this baby by herself? I said, what's wrong with you? Get yourself together. You need to move back to Ohio and be with your daughter. What is wrong with you? So I didn't realize that my mother was having money problems at this point because she don't have her business no more. She's not getting any money. She did not get any money from his like his social security or anything. Like all of that type of stuff went to Will's children. So my mother apparently is using my grandmother's social security check as her means of income. And apparently she made my sister get an apartment, and they're all living in this one-ish 2-bedroom apartment. So that's literally a few months later, I end up going up to this apartment to go home and visit, because I'm like, I keep hearing all this weird stuff. Like I'm trying to see what's going on, and I wanted to see my nephew. So when I go up there, oh, it's something going on with my sister's apartment. I can't go. The furniture is being delivered. It's all these weird excuses. So I'm already looking at my mother sideways, like something is up. And then she was dressing real. She wasn't being herself, because if you knew anything about my mother is very well put together, honey. She makes sure she is the top of the line. And she was giving really, really basic, y'all. And the type of car she was driving, it was giving like, what is going on? Like, you're really going through it. Like, something is wrong. Like, bonus part 3. So I found all this out, and I come to visit my nephew. This has to be January, because my nephew was born in October. January I came, like right after the holidays. My mother was very adamant about going to take pictures. She's like, oh, I just want to take family pictures. But at this time, my brother is not messing with my mother. Like, my brother, he took him and his girlfriend and his son. They moved, because when all this stuff happened, like when Will was shot, my brother and his girlfriend and his son was there. Like, literally, he had a 4-month-old, and he just was like, some things my brother kind of expressed to me was like, mommy was just acting real weird. He's like, I'm not saying that mommy's involved, but stuff was just looking real fishy. And so for that, he gave his distance, because he was like, the police kept looking at him, because, you know, my brother lived there. They lived in one of those duplexes. So if you're from Ohio, if you're from up north, East Coast, Midwest area, you know, they have duplex houses where it's an upstairs and a downstairs, but they're 2 separate residences. And he lived downstairs, and he was like, you know, my girlfriend was coming in with food too from the front door. So when those shots was going off, something was going on. Like, she could have got hurt, like anything. He was just like, stuff wasn't right. So he moved way out, and he wasn't messing with my mother. And so then that kind of had me feeling some type of way, like, do he know something he not telling me? But he was like, no, sis, you know, I don't know nothing, but your mother just, the way she acting, I can't mess with her. So then we go take pictures. My mother's just like, you know, I love you. She's saying all this stuff, and it's just like, what is going on? Then my nephew and my sister looks like she wants to talk to me, but she don't really know how. Stuff is just being real weird. Fast forward a few months later, I come back, maybe like in the summertime, to see my nephew, play with him. Like, he's learning how to walk. So it's probably like August. So this August, we see him. My husband at the time, I'm divorced, so y'all, that's a whole nother story. So I had a husband, we were together, and you know, we were gonna do all this stuff together, and we was, you know, with my nephew, you know, all this stuff. But the place that my mother and my sister and my grandmother were living in was real foul. Like, the apartment didn't have no furniture. It looked like my mother was living out of this car. Like, she had all these clothes and stuff in this car. She was smelling like she was like musty all the time, but not just like a regular musty, like a foul smell. And I remember back in the day, my mother was like, if I ever go to jail, if something ever go on with me, like, I'ma just be stank, because ain't nobody gonna want this, ain't nobody gonna try to get me and all this other stuff. And I'm slowly starting to look at stuff, and I'm like, yo, what's really going on here? Because something is just not right. Like, things are not right, y'all. Stay tuned. For I come to visit my nephew. This has to, y'all, I go visit. So I told y'all, I was visiting my mother and them at the end of August. Stuff was looking foul. Stuff didn't seem right. She had this little raggedy car. My mother's always driven top of the line. My mother looks good head to toe. She carried herself very well. That was just part of her image. That was part of what she was doing. Then she had this boyfriend, which was very random. Was this guy, was this truck driver that she met in Atlanta all of a sudden. And I'm just like, what is that? Like, it looks like somebody that she would never be with. So I'm kind of like, I'm trying to figure out stuff, like what's going on. I'm like, stuff is weird, but I can't put my foot on it. Like something is off and I don't know what it is. Y'all, 2 weeks later is when my sister called me and told me that she got a subpoena for the grand jury. And I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together yet. I was just like, that's weird. And then the shit hit the fan. That's when all this stuff started coming out. This one is stuff with my mom. And even to get my mom to turn herself in, it was like different people had came and like my aunts and my friend, like different people were saying all this stuff. Like my mom was writing suicidal notes and all this weird stuff. Like, I'm sorry. Like at first she had wrote this note, like, I'm sorry if I hurt anybody. I love you guys. Like she had left a note for me, one for my brother and one for my sister. And I'm already like, what is going on? So I'm tripping like, yo, my mother was really involved in this. Like, I can't believe it. But then my mother switched it up all of a sudden. Y'all, my mama crazy, y'all. She switched it up. She went from saying that, no, she didn't have anything to do with it to, it was my sister. So that's what caused so much beef, because my mother was saying that she wasn't the mastermind behind it. It was my sister. My sister had this whole plan, all because she didn't like Will and how Will was treating her and all this stuff. And then you start looking at some of the evidence, when you start putting stuff together, my mother the whole time was setting my sister up. So if anything ever went down, my mother tried to make it look like my sister did it. That's why she was so adamant about the sister's boyfriend being involved. That's why my mother kind of like had this one phone, and then a few months after all that stuff with Will, she gave my sister the phone, or they were like sharing the phone. It was weird. And so when you start looking at everything in a big picture, you like, yo, my mama is sick. Like she really killed this man for the insurance money, and was really, if she ever got caught, she was gonna pin it on her younger daughter. That's why she didn't care if where my sister had this baby. None of this stuff. My mother was gone. She did not care, y'all. What? I can't, y'all. I go.